Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. And on today's episode, Khvicha Kvaratskhelia is on his way out of Napoli, but is he going to PSG or Liverpool or a third destination? Then we've got Omar Marmoush nearly done to Manchester City and Kyle Walker heading out to Italy. What do we think of these two moves? Before we look at the Manchester United fire sale, how much are Garnacho and Mainoo really worth? That's all on today's episode. So we're well and truly in the transfer window now, and today I'm joined by Ted Knutson to talk about all the interesting rumours and some stuff that seems like it's getting done. Good to see you, Ted.
Hello. Some stuff's getting done. Almost nobody you know yet, but some stuff.
You're looking more and more like you're in a little solitary confinement cell right now.
That's my life. Like they've confined me here. I have a lovely view. They let me go out and walk around the yard like once a day. I have some weights in the back as well, so it's a lot about bulking. Some self-made tattoos.
Yeah, I figured. So I figured that by the end of the season, this shirt will come off, and then we'll see what the real situation is. Ooh. We'll see what faction you've joined, what prison faction you've joined.
I could be an Eintracht Frankfurt fan. That's been a recent thing in the news.
What?
Sorry, the ultras are everywhere. Let's just say that.
Okay, right. Well, today we're going to run the risk of annoying the ultras because we are talking about Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, who is supposedly...
Do it again. Say it again. You got to say it again. That was too fast. People can't follow along with that.
Khvicha Kvaratskhelia.
See, because what I got was Creature from the Black Lagoon, so I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't really want to get into that with Neapolitans, but getting out of Napoli kind of is like climbing out of the Black Lagoon at times. And Khvicha's been trying to do it for some time, right? So they were talking about this like earlier in the summer. He was clearly kind of saying, I don't want another year like last year, Jesus. And his agent was putting the feelers out. What we didn't expect was that come January, a move would be starting to firm up. What I definitely didn't expect is that Antonio Conte would be talking about it like he wasn't beginning a thermonuclear war. I thought that if there was a chance this would go through, Antonio Conte would be honestly just killing people in Napoli.
I think that's a regular event, but not necessarily via Conte. I wonder if Conte has had his steering wheel stolen yet. Like I feel like that's a hazing ritual that Neapolitan head coaches have to go through. Where to even start with this? So I think one of the issues I was trying to put together like all of the bits and the bobs for this thing, and effectively what I came around to was they didn't sell Osimhen in the summertime, and so there's clearly a budget deficit that needs to be covered. They did not want to sell Kvara in January, but without Osimhen moving, and apparently there's no chance that he's moving. Kvara is the option, and that was supposed to be a next year option that they've now moved forward in order to help cover the budget deficit that they've sort of triggered. Obviously going to be probably tougher for Conte to win the league without him, but he's because his agent made so much noise in the summertime and they shut it down, but like everybody knew that he was coming available or wanted to be available soon. Like people are aware of him. And the question then should become like, sort of, what are you getting? Who should be interested? And what do you need to be wary of with this particular player? Because I don't think that this is as cut and dried an awesome move as everybody else seems to.
No, I mean that part of that is circumstantial, right? So like we'll get into the player in a minute, like what he's good at and maybe what he's not so good at. But what's weird here is the reported suitors for him. So Liverpool doesn't make sense to me. Luis Diaz having a great season. They're full of talented attackers. Jota can play there too. Hakpa's been good there. No. Manchester United don't have any money. And then Paris Saint-Germain. And Paris Saint-Germain supposedly are ready to do it. And they're ready to do it with a 4x markup on the wage that Kvara is currently getting in Naples, which admittedly is not very much. I think he's making 2 million a year, something like that. And supposedly they're talking about 9 million a year at PSG. But if PSG are one of the few clubs in Europe right now who have an absolutely dynamite left winger who absolutely should not be unseated. He's homegrown. He's having a tremendous season. He's their top scorer. And his radar, his output looks better than Kvara's right now.
So I think when you look at it from that perspective, there's a couple of potential reasons why. One, like it might be that PSG are happy to sort of just trade out the monetary elements, right? They feel like they can sell Barcola for around about the same amount as Kvara. Like
Mm-hmm.
if there were, PSR reasons for them to want to do this, which, I don't think there are, but if there were, like you can sort of keep the cycle of accounting going there. Second, I feel like PSG also probably feel like they can recreate Barcola anytime they want to. It's like the olden there used to be a comedy skit back in the United States where it's like, I made one of you, I can slap you up, get you out of here, make another one just like I did the first time. And it is like that old sort of 1980s dad where you're like, yeah, slightly abusive, but also they feel like they can just recreate that player out of the academy every single
Mm-hmm.
time they want to. They have a very fast, very dribbly player that can generate some shots and also create some stuff. And PSG's academy might be one of the few in the world they actually believe that is the truth, right? They can do that every other year on a regular basis. Like it is actually a monetary sort of pipeline for them to be able to do this. That still doesn't explain why they want Kvara though. And I'm not sure that there's something that makes sense in this whole thing, unless they think that maybe they want him to switch sides, or much like Colomwani, like they know that Barcola is definitely gone in the next 6 months, so they're probably gonna try and balance them on either side of it because they do have issues when Dembele is injured, and they do have issues sort of up front. And maybe they're like, all right, we can balance this. Like Asensio's been playing striker like 7.5 matches or something this year, which is
Sure.
nuts. So I think that they know that they have needs. They are on the cusp of not making the Champions League knockout rounds, which is also super weird. And their league is really easy. So that's the other reason why Kvara might be a little bit interesting. Like they view players in France as playing easy mode. And if you bring in somebody that's excellent, but it doesn't have to be world beating from a Serie A or even from an England or from a Spain, like you're going to get the upside of tougher competition, even if they produce the same amount of stuff overall as what you've currently got.
Mm-hmm. And I think, look, Kvara is great. I think like he's a slightly different kind of profile this season, or rather, his shot quality has never been amazing, but it is down further this season. And there's still an awful lot to like here. But if you were to put him on the right wing, he's a pretty good passer. I do think that his creative numbers, he's something like 0.28 expected assists per 90. That's not the same as Barcola, but obviously he's playing in a tougher league. He's got lots of passes in the
My
penalty area.
approach for this is different. Okay, so like
Okay.
both Barcola and Kvara have one element that you'd say that they are pretty high usage, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
are
Yes.
relied upon to grab the ball and move the ball forward. So they also are what we call zone movers. And zone mover, at least in the olden time stats, didn't show up almost at all. Like the stuff that Aiden Hazard used to do, from bringing the ball basically from halfway into the final third, like that was something that I had to dig for a long time, and actually in some ways create entirely new data to be able to find those players. So both of these players are very capable of doing that. You take it and you get them into your attacking zone, and then potentially like they're good transitional elements behind it as well. So an Eberici Eza is a type of guy that used to be, or that currently is, that kind of zone mover, but doesn't always show up in the scoring stats all the time. I think Zaha was probably one of the biggest ones that we saw where like his scoring stats were always like very average, but he was the only person really that was able to get Crystal Palace into the attacking final third on a regular basis. So Kvara and Barcola both do those things. Now, the question that I have is who's fixing Kvara's shots? Because when you look at the screen right now, we've got his radar for last year, and his radar for last year is very good. It's his age 23 season. So you're seeing lots of dribble and carry kind of on ball value, which is, he's creating a lot of value from ball progression through dribbling and carrying. We know that. The flip side of that is he's losing the ball a lot because he's high usage in dangerous areas, and people know that he's the the zone mover for them. So they have to double team him regularly. He's challenged with a lot of stuff. Tons of touches in the box, useful in possession, and likes to shoot. But his shooting quality is not great. And we can show that to you visually over here. This is the shot map. And what you see is what we used to call the Andros Townsend force field. Effectively says that in the area that you get kind of in and around the center of the box, there are very, very few shots. And the question was always, if you have all of this ability, why are you settling for shots from the tough angles? Those tough angles often are blocked. The goalkeeper covers them better. And so they're less likely to be good shots from the exact same distance as ones in the center. If you're a good passer as well, which Townsend was at least in his younger days, the question then becomes like, either you need to beat the man in the dribble in the box, or you need to keep your head up in order to find another player that should be crashing on the far post or in the center to get a better shot, because those high angle shots are not great. Now, if you don't have teammates that can do that, then that's a different problem. But in these super teams, you usually do. So this is Kvara's shot map from this year. I think shots are actually down on a per 90 basis. And they're all bad. like almost all of them are very bad. This is where this whole thing falls down for me. So if we look at this year's radar, you're like, wow, okay, there are a decent amount of shots. The quality's terrible. And why is the quality terrible is something that you really want to dig into before you spend 60 to 65 million euros on this player, which is what's being rumored. Now, the funny thing about all this is that he's rumored as a potential target for Manchester United, who allegedly don't have much money, but maybe might have some money. We're not really sure. Like, we'll let the Swiss Rambles of the world and Kieran Maguire's fight about that. But what I thought was interesting is we've talked about Garnacho as exactly this same type of player and how dangerous Garnacho would be if somebody taught him better shot locations. Well, maybe they don't really like Garnacho that much. And Antonio Conte would be like, Garnacho might even be an upgrade on what we currently have. And United look at it and say, maybe he doesn't fit in the dressing room. Maybe he wants to go further south. Who knows? We could bring Kvara in, pay him, a bunch of wages, but at least we would have somebody on that side that also kind of fleshed out the zone movement, gives us danger on both sides, potentially somebody that is another cornerstone to build on for the future. I would keep Garnacho in those circumstances, but I'm not in that dressing room and I don't know like how that's supposed to work. But at least it's an interesting way that they could get Kvara on a discount and send out another potential sort of, I don't want to say problem, but asset resource that helps them financially, but also gets rid of kind of a funky, weird, bloated squad.
Sure. And I mean, the wages that we're talking about here are pretty doable for a Premier League side. It's not actually that insane, the number that we're talking about with PSG. And plus, Kvara does have a broader skill set than Garnacho right now. Kvara is a pretty good passer. Like we were saying, he doesn't complete a lot of his dribbles. I mean, like you were saying, he is a turnover machine, though actually so is Barcola. Now we're thinking about it. But, he's playing in a better league than Barcola, and he still is taking the ball into the penalty area a lot. Like you say, he's zone moving. Like he's super, super productive, even if you have to sort of take the rough with the smooth there. Garnacho, people have been talking about this for a couple of years now, that Garnacho could be on his way out. Atletico Madrid have been rumored to be interested, Barcelona.
They're pretty good this year, by the way.
Atleti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simeone just set his own record for like most wins in a row with 14. We talked about in the preseason how we thought that like they seemed to be rebuilding and going to be quite dangerous this year. It took him a bit to get everything to gel, but yeah, they certainly seem to be back to the best of Simeone's. I mean, that could be that's not a rumored destination right now, because I think they spent as much as they could in the summertime. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that when you sort of sniff around and look for the parts that start to add up, Garnacho outbound is at least a potentially likely one, unlike Antony outbound or Marcus Rashford outbound, which seem to be, they might have some noise about them, but everyone's very skeptical. I mean, I haven't even heard a sensible whisper about Antony anywhere, which basically means that United are eating almost all of his fees and his initial transfer package if somebody's going to take him off of their hands.
The only thing I saw about him was Olympiacos, which feels kind of spiritually correct. But okay, well, we were thinking about going to Manchester City next, but I wonder then if we should just jump over to Manchester United, given that we're already kind of touching on them.
Appropriately or inappropriately?
Okay. Well, I wasn't going to say what I was going to say. But United, there are now rumours that United are willing to countenance the sale of basically anyone. And that includes
with consent. Yeah.
Kobbie Mainoo.
This is mutual consent. They have to both agree. Sorry.
Control yourself.
He mentioned Neil Gaiman in the build-up here, and like my brain's just gone all that way. Sorry.
God. Kobbie Mainoo, Alejandro Garnacho are not. I was going to say untouchable. Okay. But like they are supposedly on the market as well, which is an interesting thing to come out because it's incredibly bad for the atmosphere around the club. You think, why would you want anyone to know this? Fans, I'd say are a little bit closer to where we were on Kobbie Mainoo after half a season of this.
No. Come on.
Really, I've seen some people now saying like, "Oh, this is a disgraceful performance from him," or whatever. Like, but I think I'm more embedded in.
I mean, he's still a baby too, right? Like,
Yeah.
be nice to the 19-ish-year-old.
But this is the thing, right? When you have an opinion that's based on evidence, then half the time you're saying, "I don't think he's that good," and the other half of the time you're saying, "I don't think he's that bad." Like, and it's the same player. But this is pretty incompetent, I think, from Ineos, that this is just now a rumor, because even if it doesn't happen, you're getting all the bad press with none of the benefits of like rebuilding your squad.
It's such a weird thing in that, like, first of all, they have the leakiest building in the whole of the Premier League, right? Like, stuff just comes out of United, and sometimes it's briefed by the higher ups, and plenty of times it's briefed by people that have their own agenda or just seem to like chaos, which we can appreciate. We appreciate chaos at other teams, but yeah, it's tough to keep on top of it, and certainly like impossible for them to keep a lid on. If you wanted to say that kind of everybody's available for the right price, which seems to be almost exclusively what they have, most people are available, then that's where United are. But then, like, lots of people don't want to be available, or they're trying to push back against like reasons why they might be available. Like, oh well, it is just utter chaos here, and we've had bad managers, or we've had players that don't fit the bill, and we've had to try and make everything work. But also, like, if you're anywhere between 10th and 14th in the table and you're Manchester United, like, yeah, you got a lot of problems, and people are going to complain about it all the time, because just from a budgetary standpoint, if nothing else, like, that is not where you belong.
And this is the thing, if you watch the United versus Arsenal game at the weekend, which was like a hideous game, you just look at the United team and you think, how many of these players would Arsenal take, not in their first 11, but in their squad? And it is a vanishingly small number after years of huge spending. It's just absolutely incomprehensible. I mean, look, in this window, they've gone out and they've bought Paraguayan left back and immediately loaned him back. He's going to join permanently in the summer. So they clearly do have like a few million knocking around that's not going to Eric Ten Hag and the backroom staff. Obviously, they'd be happy if money came in for Casemiro and Xerxes, Malacia. But if you were pricing Mainoo and Garnacho, how would you approach that problem?
We almost saw it in the summertime, where some of the middle tier teams were taking chances on players that were kind of 23, 24 out of the big teams that were squad level players. So like Arsenal was a classic one where you saw Reece Nelson go out, you saw Smith Rowe go out, you saw Nketiah go out. Arsenal missed their best window to sell Nketiah. They probably could have gotten an extra 10 million if they'd sold him earlier, maybe kept Balogun, maybe not. But like the price range for that type of player, not saying that Mainoo is that one, but you're looking at 20 to 40, depending on what the clauses look like and everything like that. Now, the question is, like, what do you believe Mainoo can become? And he's still really young. Like, it's not the right time to sell him. Especially if you believe you've got quite a competent manager that's used to working with young players and developing them. If you see that he has these skills, don't assume that he's the proven article. So flip it all around, right? Take your perspective from what is he currently. Put him out in the world that's not a Manchester United player. And you're like, all right, so if we saw a 19-year-old that was playing regular minutes for a pretty good team somewhere else, like, what would we pay for this player? Clearly that means don't sell him, right? Because he's not the finished product. But it might mean don't play him all the time. it might mean put him on a 1 year or 2 year somewhere else where you really like him. He's going to get a lot of playing time, but like the expectations are not as high. That might be the right case. And you can try and do a transfer around that. But I think that everybody needs to kind of like take away the fact that he was at Euros, take away the fact that he's been a Manchester United player in very difficult circumstances, look at the player as his developmental path and say that he could be a very easy future midfielder for England, but he's got deficiencies. So how do we get him to be that level? That's the right way to look at him, as opposed to here's an asset, we need to generate money. I mean, it's the same sort of thing with Minta this summer, where you're like, man, this dude's real. Like he could be that future there. He's really young. So find a way to figure out the development path. And in this case, Minta's development path was go start at Brighton. That was his development path. But Mainoo might be not at Brighton, but Crystal Palace could use some midfielders. But I'm not sure that he has the bite. And teaching Mainoo the bite, I think, is the most difficult thing. So many teams press right now, and his pressing numbers and his pressing awareness, I think, is a significant deficiency in his game. So who's going to teach him that over the next 12 to 24 months? If he gets that, like, sky's the limit.
And you would hope that Amorim can do that. I mean, like, the side right now, they're in damage limitation mode all the time. They're playing incredibly conservatively. They're trying to gum matches up as much as possible. It's not really the kind of football that he thrives in yet, because he just doesn't seem to understand it yet. I mean, what you are seeing is some upticks in, like, when his passing is like slightly better and he's dribbling slightly more. His dribbling's actually kind of interesting, for a central midfielder at his age in the Premier League. Gets fouled a lot. All this kind of stuff is nice to see.
You know who used to dribble and get fouled a lot? Jack Grealish. Yeah, he was useful at times. I mean, hopefully Mainoo's not out drinking with Jack Grealish in Manchester, because that's like a fast recipe down to League 2. But never mind.
I'm not sure anyone's keeping up with that. I mean, to turn our attention to Garnacho, then, like, if, say, Napoli did say we want Garnacho and we'll send Kvara to United for Garnacho plus X amount, how big is X amount?
I'm higher on Garnacho and lower on Kvara than I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, I think that's pretty true.
So let's say that the right price on Kvara is 60 million euros, right? So we're looking at sort of 45 to 50 million pounds. Let's say in euros. Basically, if you chopped half, maybe less. I'm high enough on one and the other. I think that, like, I'd be really excited if we got Garnacho for 20 million and shipped him out. But it depends on wages, right? I'm not excited about Kvara at 60 at all. At 40, I'm pretty interested. So split the difference, you're looking at 50 million euros. Yeah, I think if United got that, they'd be all right. But I mean, both these sides are going to fight, and clearly Napoli need money. So that's the other side of it. They would probably be much happier cashing the check and then putting somebody in there. And so, like, it's a relatively unlikely deal, which then pushes the onus and the leverage against Manchester United. So
I also just don't think you really want, like, Chelsea have been linked with Mainoo, and Chelsea obviously don't care about money. But if you're trying to get these players out of United, I don't really think you're buying the player. You're buying what United's board can sell the fans, right? Like, you're going to have to pay such a fee that they can say to the fans, we couldn't say no to, 60 million pounds for Alejandro Garnacho. We had to take it. Like, it's just going to be a massive overpay on what they are now, even if they end up becoming that thing you hope that they are.
In fact, I think what United will do is they will sell players and they will put ridiculous add-on clauses on there so that, like, big escalators. Hey, there's an extra 10 million or 15 million pounds if he's Lionel Messi level production. And what they'll do is they'll then brief it as saying this is actually a 60 million pound deal and not a 35 million pound deal, because there's 20 million in clauses that cannot be hit there. That would be kind of the PR recipe around it. But yeah, I mean, to some extent, I don't even think the fans give a shit anymore up at United. They're just like, look, stop the pain. Like, figure your shit out. Stop the pain this year. We know nothing's going to happen. So, like, we've got another 6 to 9 months of medicine. It's going to be miserable. Just, like, eventually give us a ray of sunlight that can come through and be helpful. And I think that Amorim is probably good enough to do that, but they're kind of a Bermuda Triangle of, like, weird as well. Who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, this has happened to everybody. Like, Arsenal had an era of absolutely revolting players at the back. Liverpool had like Mamadou Sakho playing there before they got into this like golden era. Like, United kind of just want to step into into a state of pure bliss without going through the pain, and it's not going to happen. But I mean, look, right now, Garnacho isn't even 21 till the summer. Kobbie Mainoo is 19, and he is good enough to get some minutes for you in the Premier League at central midfield. This is good stuff. Just sell everyone else; they're all crap.
If he wasn't on your team, you'd be looking for players of his profile to continue development. That's the perspective that you have to have.
Yeah, people lose their minds about guys like Adam Wharton. And like, I like Adam Wharton, but I think a lot of people get really excited about him because they don't watch him every week, and so they just see the bits of him they like and not his deficiencies.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
Shall we go on to Manchester City then? Stay in Manchester, God help us. They are edging closer to getting a couple of deals done. Now, firstly, the Husanov deal that we talked about, that looks like the price is going to be twice where we were. 40 million euros, something like 33, 34 million pounds. Not wild about that money.
It's bad to need things. It's really bad to need things.
Mm-hmm. And Omar Marmoush, don't really know how big that fee is going to be. Again, reports are kind of 60 to 80 million euros.
I mean, if they're paying full freight plus for Husanov, it's going to be a lot. Yep, and they seem to not be able to negotiate, and they seem to be going after it. So, I mean, not negotiate. They are negotiating, but like they just don't have any leverage because everybody knows that they need things. So when you come in, you need things, and people know it. Like it gets expensive, especially if it's only one side that has to have changes.
Mm-hmm. Marmoush is obviously, we've talked about him in the past, and he is peak age. He's having a great season. He's an excellent player, but given that City are not going to be incorporating him necessarily in his preferred position, unless Pep is planning something he's basically never done before, should City fans maybe temper their expectations as to how immediately impactful this could be?
Possibly. It depends. I think that, again, the difficulty that I have is like whether Pep would switch to a 2 up top, which is the most challenging thing. I think that he's not going to replace Haaland. Haaland is the best pure striker in the world, and they're happy to have him. It's the creativity around Haaland and then the defensive side that is the big difficulty there. Now, Marmoush gives them more ability to basically run on to through balls and stuff like that. He gives them more ability to sort of have a scoring player out wide, which is something that we've said very clearly is missing. But something that came up in the comments from the last YouTube that we did about him was that we said that he doesn't have high dribble numbers. He doesn't. But the reason why he probably doesn't have high dribble numbers is because he's really fast. You know who also didn't normally have that many high dribble numbers? Like Mbappe. But that's because if you're really fast and you're running ahead of everybody, you don't actually have to dribble around them. They're just not in play. And so that's actually sort of it's a confounder for elite pace players that don't put up numbers like that. It's not saying that they can't do it. It's simply that they've got other means of getting into the box very quickly that doesn't involve beating a player. The thing that I found most interesting about Marmoush, and we've got his radar up here, and then this is sort of his this year shot map, and obviously he's well above the expected goals. Like the triangles on the shot maps are basically ones where he's run onto through balls, or he's got shots from through balls. The diamonds are ones that are completed dribbles, so like it's a shot that came after a completed dribble, which is pretty interesting. Diamonds and through balls, or diamonds and triangles and shot maps are sexy things when you're looking to plot your data and looking for types of players. But if we look over here at the open play expected, open play assists, that's kind of the thing that I think City really are looking for as well. They're looking for one more player who can up front in some type of role be able to create a little more for somebody else, somebody who is capable of keeping their head up and around the box. And in previous seasons, Marmoush also had good assist numbers as more of a wide attacking forward or sort of midfielder-ish role, not a pure striker. So I think that that's the thing that's most exciting about him. Obviously, City have attacker needs. He's kind of sort of available. He fits most of the bill. The question is really, how does Pep fit him in? But the reality is, Pep has fit in people like Thierry Henry early in his career, who was absolutely a pure forward, and then he turned him into a wide attacker. and he was that sort of wide left side, but also very capable of getting into the box to finish things. So I think that is a very, very old reference, but one that you say, okay, you've got an elite pace guy that can keep his head up and can score, like he'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, you've also seen him use guys like Pedro or even Thomas Muller, who isn't like an obvious fit for any one particular position.
He just doits around.
Yeah, exactly. So it should. I'm excited to see him play in the Premier League. I think it's a really interesting one. I think it'll be especially interesting with less space. Like what does he look like there? That's really, really intriguing.
But here's the thing: like this year feels like the Bundesliga year for the Premier League.
Yeah, that's true.
It feels super transitional. So we're not sure that he's going to get less space because everybody keeps pushing their defenses up. Even David Moyes might even push a defense up a little bit. Maybe press some guys. No, it's not happening.
I mean,
oh, did you see?
Relegated.
Did you see me get in like big trouble with Everton fans?
Yeah,
last
of course
week?
I did. I loved it. I wanted to favorite every single comment. Every comment made me laugh. Every new
why don't you describe it for the people, because it's useful for everyone else to know.
Okay, so Ted said, "Look, Dyche has been doing a really good job under extremely trying circumstances. Like Everton have been limping through this season with the hope that they'll be able to, get to a takeover and then get to some investment. And there are very few managers who could have done this. And Dyche is going to be fine after this, but we're less sure about Everton." Is that a fair representation of what you said?
I think that's a pretty fair representation. In fact, I went so far as to say I think he's done one of the best 4 jobs as a head coach in the Premier League this year. I think that it's like Nuno, it's Slot, it's Iriola, and it's Dyche. Mm-hmm. And if nobody knows what it's like to be around a club that has like financial crisis, 24/7 for 18 months, like that is an insane circumstance. And then they're like, oh, well, he did a good job last year, but he's done a terrible job this year. Like, really? And then they're like, oh, well, the squad is better this year. I'm like, the squad is older, and some of those guys should be retired, like very clearly retired. And yet he still has to trot them out there as fullbacks. We have learned over and over again that it is important to have competent midfielders and fullbacks in the Premier League. He has neither for most of the season, like partly due to injury and partly just due to the fact that there's nobody in the squad that fills the bill. So somebody said, and actually like the person that covers Everton for The Athletic was saying similar things, but in a very reasoned, measured way, unlike every other person that commented on this. And I was like, okay, so he tried to play a more interesting attacking style early in the season. Do you remember those games? Do you remember what happened in the first games of the season? We have a 0-3 against Brighton with a red card. We have a 4-0 against Tottenham. We have a home match against Bournemouth that was 2-3, and they happened to give up 3 goals in like the last 10 minutes, right? That was a fun one. And then we have a 3-2 at Aston Villa. Those were the first 4 matches of the season. All 4 were big wipeouts. And he probably looked and said, there is absolutely no chance that we can play with any attacking flair whatsoever with this squad. And so from that point onward, 0 for 4 in the first matches, he has grounded out, and they are not in the relegation positions. And that, with a cloud of bankruptcy, with a mismatched squad that is so old in many of the positions, and players like DCL that have been injured like half of the time through most of their careers and stuff like that, this man has taken them to not be in the relegation positions. That's fucking masterful. And if people don't get it, that's okay. That's not my job to make them get it. But I have been in this industry for something like 20 years, and I'm not the biggest Sean Dyche fan. Like I used to give him a really hard time about his style of play and stuff like that. But he could have Russell Martin the shit out of this job and just been like, I'm going to play my style. I'm going to play my style, and gone out there and done all these horrible losses that would have seen them occasionally score more goals, but they would be much lower in the table right now. Instead, he ground out this set of results, and it's not always been that much fun to watch, but they were worth it to get them to the point where Friedkin could come in, buy some players, and hopefully be able to add some firepower to that squad. Now, whether that'll happen this window, like not entirely sure. Maybe Dyche was done. That's okay too. But all I wanted to say was he had done a fantastic job this season in impossible circumstances and deserves recognition for that. And I think a lot of people just look at, oh, we haven't scored any goals in a bazillion games. Like, that's okay, because like you got more than 5 points at the bottom of the table like Southampton had.
I mean, I don't really have much to add to this, except that if you like seeing Ted get cooked, then you should definitely go and check out this thread on Twitter.
It was
funny.
fun, and mute conversation was like my friend within the first 45 minutes. I was like, oh, I'll come back to that when everybody's done done being angry at me.
I'll just retweet the bits I like then. Okay, before we go, so from one much maligned guy to another, Kyle Walker apparently on his way out to AC Milan, 34 years old. They're talking about a 2.5-year deal. What do we think about this? Because I was just like, what is he going to be? Is he going to be a right back there? Is he going to be a more reserved right back there? Is he going to be a centre back there? Like they're playing Gabbia and Emerson on the right. Like, how much of his decline over the last couple of years do you think is related to City, and how much of it is related to the fact that he's super fucking old? I don't get it.
Some of these players should be retired is probably like the bucket that you're now in.
Copy paste. Okay. Maybe one of the slides next week, Rishi, we should have one that just says these players should be retired. I don't know. Get paid.
I thought the Inter Milan one was, we would like to loan him for 6 months before we agree to any further deal. I'm like, yeah, that's probably the safe way to do it. Meanwhile, you got Zlatan out there like, yeah, sure, 2.5 years. That's fine.
God. I don't know. Like, look, if Milan want to do that, they bought Emerson, so they can't be taught to. So we'll see what happens there. Like, they're okay. Milan are better than you think anyway this season, so I broadly think they'll be fine. But this is money that you don't need to spend on a guy you don't need.
And that's part of the thrill of making deals. Can you sell somebody guys that they don't need for reasons that you don't understand, but happen to give you money? At the end of the day, that's what January is all about.
Exactly. And thank you very much for joining us for our January podcast so far. We really do appreciate it. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please do like and subscribe to the channel. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app as well. Make sure you're signed up to the newsletter. Follow us on all our social media accounts. And we will catch you on Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll talk a little bit about El Clasico and some more transfers.
Hang on, because we got midweeks this week, I'm going to hop in and say on Friday, I did a full analysis of my personal wagering so far on Variance Betting. I did it for free, so it's a free column. We're going to put it down in the show notes so you can follow along. If you're interested in kind of like how my return to sports betting and gambling looks like, I tried to tell you, what I've been seeing, what I've been pretty good at, what I've not been great at, like teams that have kicked me in the teeth every single time that I bet on them, Coventry. But if you're interested at all, it's going to be there. You can follow along. You can kind of see some recommendations for how you might be able to find places to bet like I have as well. So that's pretty useful. And then on Friday, we're going to start to return the Friday EPL kind of wager show to YouTube as well. So if you're interested, follow along. Hopefully it's fun. We're going to up the wager stakes as well because things have been positive so far. And if you're not interested, that's totally fine too. But when, if you're worried about the gambling side of it, I bet like people put money into the stock market, and I've been doing this for a long time, and it's always paid returns if you do it right. So that's kind of the concept behind it. Follow along, click on that. And thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Are you like a 65-year-old Swedish hunter? We have like a knitted cardigan in camouflage here.
I have a Polo Ralph Lauren Japan shawl collar cardigan on. If that's what you're asking.
I literally cannot buy clothing from Japan. I have been there, and I'm like, this is so cool, and none of it fits.
Yeah, I mean that does happen.
You're like 5'8", right?
If that, man. Like,
this is why it makes sense. You fit, I do not. I got you.
Though I don't. Yeah, my issue is not vertical; it's horizontal. I find that's where we get into trouble.
They have sumo there. You're good.
That's true. But I do find that if you go into a shop and you're like, I have a 44-inch chest, they're like, no.
I also have a 44-inch chest.
This isn't going to work.
But it's like the size UK 11 feet, and they're like, those trainers are so like sneakers. And even in 2005, I'm like, these are incredible. They're like, yeah, give us 4 decades, maybe 5. We might, get to be your height eventually. At some point, you'll be able to spy stuff.
So I have size UK 11 feet as well. So like, what
you can't buy shoes there either.
There must be people. They must have the technology to produce.
Rishi, I think he just said that he's a hobbit. That's what
I'm just like, a perfect like
Square.
right angle. Right angle is what it.